Hello, I'm Mark, and welcome back to part 2 of my tutorial series on Unreal Engine's plugin system. So, in the first part, we did a brief overview of the plugin of Unreal Engine's plugin system, as well as create our first simple content-only plugin. So in this video, where we'll be switching over to building C++ plugins in Unreal Engine, and in doing so, we'll be doing a little bit more of a deeper dive since there's a little bit more to take into consideration when building plugins through C++. So as always, we have a lot of ground to cover today, so let's get started. Okay, so let's get started with our first C++ plugin. So to do that, in the plugins page, I'm going to hit the add button. And as you can see here, we're going to come up, this is Unreal Engine's choice of plugins that we can create. And I'm going to start off with a Blueprint Library plugin. So if you're familiar with Blueprint libraries through Unreal Editor as far as the Blueprint, quote unquote, Blueprint library. That's something where you can create a whole slew of reusable functions that you can reuse in your project. So we're just going to create a C++ version of it that we can then also, and we're going to wrap that into a plugin so that if you wanted to distribute it, that common set of functions you can. Again, I'm just going to keep this very simple, but you can, there's a lot of things that you can do with this Blueprint stuff. So let's get started here. So I've selected Blueprint Library. So what as for any plugin, we have to give it a plugin name. So I'm going to call this Cool Function Library. Real original. It's going to be me, description. All right, so we've got that. Author URL, not going to worry about that. We'll flag as beta, why not? Show content directory. Since this is a Blueprint library, it's really not going to be, there's really no content. I'm just going to turn show content directory off. And we're going to say create plugin, and then we will let Visual Studio and Unreal Engine do their little dance to create my plugin blueprint or a plugin template for us. All right. Okay, so once it is done generating those files, we can come into our solution. So this is our plugin live demo. I'm just going to go ahead and minimize the Unreal Engine stuff here. So this is my C++ solution, and under here we have our source code. But as soon as we start building C++ plugins, it's going to go ahead and create a new folder for us called plugins. So this is going to be where every single plugin that so as you can see, I've got cool content demo, even though technically that's just content only. There's no other source code resources here. But here's our function library, and under functions we've got resources, right? And then under there we have source, and then under source we have our structure for our C++. So again, public private folders. Private is the CCP implementation, public is where we've got our definition. So pretty much everything else is standard. We can come into the cool function library, and here's our meta file right here. So this is all the information that the editor uses to kind of populate the information over here. As you can see, by default it likes to put things under other, so we can go ahead and change this a little bit. So let's just go do that real quick. So we'll do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and close that. Cool plugins. Okay. think, yep, there we are. This is the editor custom virtual path is actually very useful because it can help you find when you're creating plugins, right, and you want to group them. You can help you find your plugins compared to everybody else's plugins. So we're just going to go grab that as well. Going to hit OK. Just to make sure everything's in the right place. All right, so now that we've got that, let's bring back the editor. And as you can see there, we've just added a couple of new things, so it's just added some additional. So if you're adding additional things through the editor, it'll go ahead and continue to add additional elements to this JSON structure here that it's using to populate that field. All right, so that's the meta file. So let's go see what it has created for us. So first off, as always, because it's a plugin, it's created this class for us. This class is a standard class. This is the using the I modular interface. So this is what Unreal Engine looks for to when it brings a plugin in or shuts a plugin down. You can add, if you needed to, you can add custom code on startup and then shut down right here. So as you can see here, these are overrides. But since we're not really doing anything, we're just going to leave them empty, but that's what it looks like. And then, as you can see here, we've got our first class. Oops, let's go to our header file. So this is what it's generated for us, and it's given us some rather useful, helpful text here, as well as a link to the Unreal Engine wiki if we wanted to learn more about this. So as you can see, I'm just going to put this little space there. So here we're using, we've created a class that is actually deriving off the Blueprint function library class. So this is a class that is in the Kismet. And if you've been doing a lot of work in Blueprint, say you're doing a lot of ray tracing, or you've been doing a lot of using some more advanced math functions in Blueprints, if you ever hover over it, you'll notice that it'll tell you which library it's pulling from. It's either pulling from the Kismet systems library for ray tracing, and sphere tracing, right? But all the math functions are coming out of Kismet math library. And what they are is they're essentially a static class like this, inheriting from the Blueprint function library, where it can encapsulate, where it can give you tools that kind of gets access to a lot of the C++ things. So again, sweeps and traces. If we do it under C++, we have to say get world and use the function off the world, but we can't really do that in Blueprints, so they created a static class to kind of encapsulate that. And then with like a lot of the vector math that we use, right, if we look at the struct in C++, we can see the functions on the structs, but in Blueprints you can't get access to those functions because in Unreal Engine Blueprints, structs are just data and data only. So if you want functions on that data, then what they did was they created a Kismet math library which uses a very similar setup to this, where you pass in the struct and then it will and it will then execute the function which is on that struct to bring that data back. So that's just kind of how that works. All right, so now we've kind of gone over what the Blueprint function library is and how it can be used. Let's see what else it's generated for us. So as you can see here, we've got this generated Unreal Engine class body macro, and then also we have this, it just gave us this nice little default static float function, and it gave us, and as you can see here, if we just expand this out, and let me just increase this to whoa, 200 is probably a little too big. 150, get a little bit better. So as you can see here, we have a function, Blueprint callable, and then we have this meta giving us a display name, keywords for search, and then we also have this category. Whenever doing a C++ function library, or really anything, any of this, category is going to be very important. It's one of those things where when you get to packing process, if you're missing the category, Unreal Engine will literally abort the packing process for plugins, because you kind of need that category on every function and every property. That is considered blueprint callable. If it's not a blueprint callable, it doesn't matter. It's only if it's blueprint callable, and that's only because when Unreal Engine will do its packing process, and we'll get into that when we actually start packing some of these other plugins that we're going to be creating. We'll start to see that and go through and show you kind of how you can kind of decrypt the log file, so you can figure out if something's going wrong, what's going wrong, and how you can fix it. But for now, we've got some functions here. So we've got the blueprint callable, and so I'm going to switch this out to a couple of functions that I pre-created. So I'm just going to go and replace this. So what I've got here is I've got this inverted float parameter here, and then I've got this hello world here. Again, change the display text. So this is invert float function, this is hello world function, and these are keywords which you can use to kind of find things. I've kind of kept those the same, but technically you can make them unique. Category is the same because it's all part of the same static library. And notice that this is static, so because this is static, we don't need to instantiate an instance of it. These are just considered functions on a class. All right, so now we can go ahead and look at implementation. So let's go ahead and see if Visual Studio will actually create these in the right place. All right, I'm just gonna remove that. That red squiggly you can ignore because that's a constructor, and that's correct. I don't know why Visual Studio is complaining about that one. All right, so here's our inverted and hello world. Again, I'm just doing these just so we can kind of play with this. These are very simple, but you can make, if you've got like some complex logic, it probably makes sense to put it into something like this, especially if you've got something that you want to reuse over and over again. So the inverter is very simple. All we're going to do is we're just going to take a float parameter in, and we're just going to go ahead and multiply that by -1, which will flip it. So if a positive comes in, it'll be a negative. If a negative comes in, it'll become a positive. And I'm also going to do this for my text. So with this one, we're going to take a text in, we're going to take a double input value. The input value is just going to determine how many times we're going to iterate this text value. So we have some pre-text, which is hello Unreal Engine, and then we have this in-text that we're just going to append to it. So we're just going to do a string append, and then we're going to iterate through how many times we're going to go ahead and append this to itself, and then we're going to do an ftext from string and return it. Else, if this is not defined, we just return just the message without any iteration involved. So that's kind of how that's going to work. All right, so I'm just going to close that, and I'm just going to close this. All right, so now what we're going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and compile it and make sure everything works. And then I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do one more example where you can create a custom function where you can pass a struct in. Again, if you're using structs and you have functions on there and you want to make those functions accessible to in the blueprints, this is kind of the method that you'd also use. So we'll go ahead and do that as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and compile this, and we'll then go over to the editor and start adding and create a struct so that we can use for our third function. Okay, so first off, pro tip: when working with plugins in Unreal Engine, there's a couple of things you're going to need to do for C++ plugins. First off, I recommend disabling live coding. I always disable this anyway. It's just I don't know. It tends to get in my way more than it actually helps. So disable that so we don't have any hot patches. All right, so once that's disabled, so when working with plugins, ordinarily when I'm actually in a project file, I'll usually compile through here, but this really only works if you have C++ in your main project. If you don't have any C++ in your project, then this really isn't going to work. So when dealing with plugins, you actually want to build in Visual Studio. So as you're building your plugins, you want to execute. So I'm just going to say build solution and let this go ahead and run and build. As you can see, there it is, and we get a good one. So again, if you're used to building in C++ in a regular project, and you run the compiler from the editor, it only run it. Now, if you have code in the main project, it will build the main code as well as the plugins. But if you don't have any code in the main project and you're only working on C++ plugins, then it doesn't seem to want to work at all. So then you just have to come over. So if that's the case, just come up, either put a dummy piece of code in the main project, which is kind of crufty, or you can just build it through Visual Studio. But either way, I suggest just making sure that you turn live coding off. All right, so we've built that, and so now we should be able to see our two functions as well as our code. So let me just go ahead and close the plugins. Let's go to our content drawer and see if our new plugin has showed up. So cool, content plugins, and then we have the demo plugin. All right, so sometimes you might see this. This is kind of a little weird. Actually, no, this is my function. This is a function library. There it is. There it is. So here's our function library. So as you can see here, we changed some information, but in order for it to actually move it into the MarksDevs plugins, I'm going to have to close the editor and reopen it because of just how the editor seems to work. But at least it's loaded the function in for now. So if you're building it for the first time and you go in and it says, well, it hasn't put it in there, if you close the editor, reopen it, it'll then go ahead and rearrange your content drawer. But it shouldn't really affect anything going on in here. All right, so we've got the cool function library. So what I'm going to do before I do anything else is I'm going to go ahead and create my new struct so we can have all of our examples working. So here I'm just going to come to none, just because Unreal Engine doesn't have, does it? No, nope, still doesn't have a blueprint for a C++ struct. So I'm going to hit none. I'm going to go to next. And let's go ahead and create this new struct. So I am going to call this, just for testing purposes, core new test struct. All right, so, and I'm going to hit public. So before we actually add this to a project, okay, again, another tip. We have to select the runtime that we actually want to build it into. So as you can see here, plugin, this is the project, right? But this is the plugin. So each plugin is its own kind of like distributable piece of code that kind of then gets, at runtime will then, or at compile time will then get compiled into the project. Actually, it's done at runtime. Will get brought into the project and executed. So this allows you to create, it's a very modular style of programming. And so we want to make sure that whenever you're adding these classes, make sure you add it to the right runtime. So I want to add it to the plugin. So as you can see here, as soon as I switch that, it's changed the URL path. If I go here, this is the project. This is the plugin within the project. So again, if you create a new class and then you go into Visual Studio and you can't seem to find it, or you figure out why is it putting it into the wrong, check to make sure that when you're going through the wizard, you've picked the right runtime that you want to build into. And this can be very useful, especially as you create more and more plugins within a solution. You want to make sure you put it in the right place. So there it is. And then we're just going to say create class so that I can create a class that I'll turn into a struct. All right, it's all in there. It's compiled. Let's go bring up here. I'm going to hit reload. And let's go ahead and convert this into a struct. So I'm just going to do that. Bring that over. We're going to put an F here and here. Unreal Engine, anything with enough F in front of it usually denotes that it's a struct within Unreal Engine. Sometimes it can be a class. If Unreal Engine does create a class with an F in front of it, it's usually a class that is not being managed by Unreal Engine's memory management system. But for most part, it's usually a struct. And let's just put a couple of little things in here which we can use for this demo. And I'm just going to do that there as a constructor, so that way we can just put a default in there. And since we don't need this anymore, I can just remove that. Hit save. And then we just need to go ahead and define this function. So let's go do that real quick. And so I'm just doing a simple little string concatenation here. So what we're going to do is these are integers, so we're going to do a string from int. We're going to take the x and put it in the combine. Then we're going to take our splitter, which is technically the separator, I should say. It's because we're not really splitting. And we'll just append that, and then from there we'll then go ahead and append another. So this is just string appends functions. And then once we have this, then we say text from string. So as you can see here, these are structs and they all have functions on them. But if you use an ftext, you can't really use that from string function. You have to use one of the library utilities to get access to it, which is ironically what we're creating. So that's that. So now we have that. I'm going to come back to our library function. And let's go ahead and build that. So to do that, I'm just going to go include. So this is going to be core new test structure. So there's our include there. And I'm going to go ahead and bring this function over. So as you can see here, we have to pass in the struct because we want to execute this function. In order for us to be able to execute this function on this struct, we have to pass it in and then it'll execute it. So that's kind of how we're doing it. It's the roundabout way when dealing with structs, but this is kind of how Unreal Engine deals with executing functions on structs. So let's show potential fixes. So we've got this, just ignore that. And then all we're doing here, is we're just taking this and then executing the function on it and returning the ftext back. So that's it. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and close that. That's the build script files that Unreal Engine uses for packing. Not going to get too into the weeds on that. All right, so I think we're good there. We're good here. So let's go ahead and rebuild this. And then we'll go over and check these functions out in the blueprints. All right, so again, if you're working in plugins, it's better to just build it right here. So I'm just going to run that. All right, everything succeeded. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to go move this off screen, come back. So in our content drawer, I'm going to come up to content and let's go ahead and create a blueprint. For this, I'm actually going to use a pawn class, just so it'll just make it a little bit easier. VP test. Gonna open this guy up, and I'm just gonna add a cube. I'm just gonna move this up to the default scene component, and then I'm gonna add a spring arm. That way I can control a camera and a camera on the spring arm. Boom, boom. Again, just going to keep this real simple. We're not really doing much to this. So now let's go ahead and go into the content drawer. Actually, no, we're already here. So let's go over to the event graph and test out our functions. So if we just right click here, so since these are blueprint functions, we should just be able to right click and say, and then I'm just going to say, so as you can see here, new library plugin test, execute invert float. So that's the function for invert float. Then we also have hello world, so we can find that. And then we also have our let's see, it's combine here. Should show up. If it doesn't show up, chances are we have to probably refresh the solution. So let's just do one more test. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to have to I'm just going to compile this. What I'll do is I'm going to, so right now it's not showing up because, and this is a bug in Unreal Engine Editor. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close this. I'm going to close my solution, reopen it, and it should show up. Okay, so if you're creating a new function or you're creating something and you compile it in Visual Studio and it's not showing up in the editor, it should, but sometimes it doesn't. What I did was I just closed the editor, reopened it, and first off, as you can see, it went and magically moved our library into the under the right folder, so it fixed that. And if we come back to our class here, so we couldn't find it, so and magically, presto magical, it goes and fixes that for us. So these are the three functions in our library. As you can see, they're all blueprint callable. So let's just go ahead and just make sure that these execute and run. So I'm just going to run a delay on here. And I think 0.2 is just fine. And then off there, I'm just going to run a sequence. And I'm just going to put that in there. I'm just going to put that in there. We'll add a pin and put that down there. All right, so let's just clean that up. So as far as the parameter, I'm just going to put a 5 in there. And off here, I'm just going to say print string. We're just going to keep it simple. And I'm just going to go and drag that into there. And we'll keep, and everything else can stay the same. I'm not going to really change that. Let me just move this up a little bit. Next, I'm going to put in a test plugin. So that's what I'm going to run there. Let me just make this a little bit bigger for you guys. And I am going to put 2, since this is in how many times I want this thing to iterate before it stops. And here I'm just going to say print text. I'm just going to drag that over. So print string, this has been around for a while. This looks like they've added this in a couple of versions ago. So this just does the same thing. It's just puts a text in instead of a string. They're both again, development only. So when you compile this as the production version, these things will turn off if you forget to take them out. But yeah, so it's just another way. This just allows you to do more of a formatted string versus just a raw string. All right, and then the last one is here. So this is going to be our struct. And again, I'm just gonna copy this and put that there and that there. So the way this is going to work is that we need a struct. So I'm just going to come under variables, click on this, and call this test struct. I'm going to move over to details, and here we should see our core new test struct. And if we compile it, save it, here's our struct. I'm going to put a 5 there, 5, and 12 there. We'll keep the separator as, actually, you know what? We'll do that instead. And compile it, so we'll change that. And so now if we want to print this, right? We have a function that's on there, and that's why we created this library function. So what we'll do is we'll just go grab the struct, do a get, and put that in there, and then that should print it for us. So I'm just going to compile this, hit save, and we can I'll probably just close this for now. So now we need it. I'm going to need to drag this onto a map. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come up here to file. I'm going to say new level, and I'm just going to pick a basic level. I'm going to say create, and there we go. Come into our content drawer, drop our cube. I'm going to come over to details and just tell it to possess it. And so if I hit the play button, as you can see here, there are functions running off our little thing. So the first one is going to be the inverter. And then we have the hello engine. So there's the inverter there. So as you can see, it's actually bottom to top. So the last one we're running in the sequence is our 5, splitter 12. Then there's our hello Unreal Engine, and then there's our inverter. We put in a +5, we're getting a -5 back. So again, simple little functions, but that's kind of how you can set it up. So and this can be very useful, especially if you're writing like a conversion library. So you need to, you're constantly converting from centimeters to kilometers, or from centimeters to miles. Those kind of conversions. But as well as any other types of conversions you might need to do. You can again create libraries, and then if you create as a plugin, you can distribute that out. All right, so I'm just going to hit that stop. So that's how you can build a blueprint function, right? And that can be very useful if you're just if you've got some just standard functions that you want to kind of distribute. But what happens if we've got modular? Now we want to move into modular code. Say we've got something like, say we want to create some kind of a physics movement system, or we have a questing engine, or we have an interaction system which we really like, and we want to put this into other games or distribute it out. We can do that again through the plugin architecture. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to hit save here. Actually, we're not going to hit save because we're going to still need this anyway. We're actually going to come up to file, and I'm going to come to plugins, So let's create a new plugin, and I'm going to go to add, and we're going to create a blank plugin. So this is, so if you're kind of wanting to create new components, right, that you want to turn into plugins, blank is probably where you're going to go. This is the minimal amount of code needed to get started, and so there's a couple of little things that we need to do in order to try, and there are some gotchas. And we'll cover that when we create this for our first new blank plugin. Okay, so I've selected blank plugin, and I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to call this base plugin, and this is going to make a little bit more sense a little bit later, because we're going to reuse this plugin as a base plugin for another plugin that we're going to create. So I can then show you how you can create plugins that have hierarchy, that have dependencies on other plugins. And how to kind of do that, because it does require a little, again, a little bit of finesse when creating these plugins. So we've got base plugin, we've got blank, and again, I'm just gonna, it's me, description, and we'll make it beta, why not? This may or may not have content, so I'm just going to put the, so you can distribute C++ and blueprints, right, or other content with it. So if you're going to do that, you can keep the show content directory. Otherwise, if this is just purely C++, you could turn that off, and it's just purely C++. Again, it's up to you on how you want to do it. You can always come back later and turn this on or off. So just because you decide to turn it off here, and maybe later on you might want it back on again, you can always go back into edit and change it there. So for now, base plugin, I think everything looks good. So let's go ahead and create this plugin. And let's see what we've got. I'm just going to bring this up, hit reload, bring it back over. All right, so as you can see here, we're starting to build under plugins. We're starting to get a lot of plugins now. So this is our cool content, which is just config and, an icon. But the content is actually in the content part. Here's our library, and then here's our base. So under base, out of the, right off the bat, all we have is our plugin ini here. So we've got our plugin.h. This is our startup, and that's it. So in order for us to be able to add something in here, there's a couple of ways to do this. And we'll try and cover the easiest way to do it. So I'm just going to go ahead and move that off, and we can close this. And if we come to content drawer, so if I come to content drawer right now, you can see I've got base plugin here. If you've got the folder, as you can see here, if I right click, this is just the content folder. It's not the C++ folder. And you're like, well, I want to add something. It's a little bit weird because there's no C++ there. So to do that, all we have to do is we just need to come up. There's two ways we could do it. We could either come up to Tools, New C++, and pick the thing that you want. So if it's going to be a component, it can be a component. If it's going to be a new pawn, it can be a new pawn or a new actor, or even a custom character, right? Or it could be a scene component. Whatever you're doing, you can pick it. So this is one way of doing it. The other way to do it is to go into your blueprint. So if you have a blueprint already, you can come into add and then new C++ component, and you can also do it through this. This is if you want to just do a component. And again, once you're here, you can just make sure you pick the right runtime and it'll add it in there. So if it's a component that you're adding, you can do it this way. Otherwise, if it's more of an actor, you can just come under, let's just close that, come back up to the main editor, go under Tools, C++, and we'll just do it this way. And I'm going to go, this is just going to be a component, and hit Next. Again, make sure you pick the right runtime, very important. And also, just another tip, when building this, Unreal Engine, again, the editor seems to have an issue if you don't have at least a component in the root. So that's why I'm going to leave this component. So this is the main component. So if you have subcomponents of a component or subclasses of a class or other structures, you can create a nice organized structure behind it. But for some reason, if you don't have something other than just the module in that root, then the Unreal Editor tends to not be able to find it. It'll still work. You can still use it in C++, but the editor can't seem to find it for some reason, so you might not see it in the blueprints. So again, let's go ahead and name this component. So let's go. And I'm just going to call this base actor. We'll call this cool base actor component. And that is going to go into there. Again, make sure you pick the right runtime. Hit create class. And then this should create the class. And once that's created, then suddenly we'll get a content drawer. And we can then just add it in through the content drawer. All right, so now if we come to the content drawer, right, so as you can see here, it's kind of weird because it kind of split the content, base plugin content and the base plugin content C++. Again, if you want to fix that, just close the browser and reopen it, and it will reopen it. Oh, and it will fix it. Again, this just seems to be a glitch in the editor. But here we are. Here's our cool base components. And if we move over to our editor, just like everything else, when you're adding a component now, it's now added it, and it's now added it to our plugin instead. So again, once you've created, my suggestion is if you're going to have it, if it's a component, have this in the root, right? Or if it's an actor, have this in the root. If this is the main component. And then if you're going to have subfolders, then you can create your subfolders off that, for organization. Otherwise, the editor just doesn't seem to be smart enough to kind of look further than the root. Now, once you do have that base, it will look further than the root, but for some reason it looks there first, and if it doesn't see a class, it figures that it's an empty plugin for some reason. All right, so let's get this component to do some work for us. So to do that, we can keep all of that the same. I'm just taking a look at my other solution. All right, so I'm just going to copy this over. And I'm just going to remove this category real quick. So again, blueprint read write, default, read write, default. So we have a string message, some value. And then we're going to just add some functions. I'm just going to remove this category here. So let's just go ahead and fill this out. So we've got some functions, blueprint callable. These are blueprint callable as well. So let's go ahead and update that real quick. So let's go to add some function. Make sure it's going to call base actor component. Make sure it adds it in the right place. And let's put some implementation in here. As far as begin play, I think we can just leave that, as well as the constructor. I'm going to leave that. Tick, I'm just going to leave that. Again, you can make this as fancy as you want. It's all up to you. Again for the all we're going to do here is on the print we're just going to do an append. So what this is going to do is we have a message, and all we're just doing is we're just going to keep appending. So if we just keep appending, this thing should start crawling across the screen on the next line and the next tick in the demo. All right, so now we've got the function there, cool base component, we've got plugin. So let's go ahead and get this into our blueprint so that we can see it in action. So I'm just going to go ahead and minimize this. So let's go back up to our content. I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate the cube. Cube class 2. And I'm just going to go ahead and remove all of this. And I'm going to go ahead and add cool base actor. So there it is. So there it is. There's our component. It's being called from our plugin, and we now have this guy. And if we come over here, as you can see here, we've got the, let's see, sockets, parent, component, tick. Where is the information? We should see that. Okay, so again, if it's the first time you're putting it in, if you don't see it, just double check to make sure you've compiled it. If you're still not seeing it, you might need to kind of, close everything down and reopen it. Again, Unreal Engine caching issues. But as you can see here, I've got the components. Cool base actor. We've got our hello world. This is Unreal Engine, and then we have some value which is 100. So let's go ahead and get this base component working, and then after that we'll go ahead and pack it for distribution, and walk you through that process. So to get this working, to do that, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to run this. I'm just going to run this off tick again. So all I did was I just duplicated the class 2, so it's got the same cube spring arm. We just added the components, and I'm gonna put a delay in here. And then off the component, there's a couple of functions we can use. So I'm just going to say add value. So here's our add value function. And since it's integer, I'm just going to put 5. Why not? And then again, I want to then call the other function, which is the where's that function? Oh, print call message. That's the one we want. So I'm just going to go hook that up. So what this is going to do is it's just going to print the message after the value's been added. So let's go ahead and drop this in and see what happens. So let's go back to our test map, and I'm going to remove the first cube, put the second cube in, just drop that there, and I'm going to hit play. Oops. Details, let's go ahead and do that. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Help if we outputted it. So okay, let's just do that. Hit the play button, and there it is. And you can see it's just adding, just continuing to append as it's going across the screen, and it's just adding new values to it. So again, just something simple, kind of show you how it works. All right. So now that we've got our new plugin, let's go ahead and pack it for distribution. So in order to do that, we can come up to our file and we can go to plugins. Let's go ahead and just brown this a little bit. So I'm just going to move this over to here, hit edit and put that there, hit OK. So as you can see here, we have the edit file. This allows us to go ahead and make our edits. Again, I covered this in part 1. So in order to pack it, and we did this in part 1 too for the content plugin, but we can also do it now. Okay, I'm surprised it hasn't changed that yet. Let me just close this and reopen. Oh, yep. Let me just fix this real quick. I'm just gonna, and let's just do this. All right, so everything's going in the right place. There it is. As soon as that happens, everything's under cool plugins. All right, so here's our base plugin. So for functions and for base plugin, it's the same process. Since we didn't do it for the cool function library, I'm just going to do it for the base plugin, but it's the same thing. You're just going to hit the pack process. And in doing so, we're just going to hit package. We're going to find a place to put it. I'm going to put it into, I've got this folder, which is my plugin demos. As you can see here, I've got game plugin, which I probably don't need, so I can just delete that real quick. This is our content plugin, so I'm just going to be putting our new base plugin into this folder. So I'm going to hit select folder, and then I'm going to let it just run the packaging process. And depending on how big your plugin is, this could take a while. If it's a small plugin, it'll go pretty quick. If it's a large plugin, it might take a hot second. And there you go. And right now the task has failed, and I kind of did this on purpose, so I can kind of show you some of the output. So if this is the first time you're doing a plugin, you're probably going to get this. You're going to see this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to minimize this. Let's go to the output log. So what Unreal Engine's doing is it's going to compile your plugin. It always does a compile, but then it's going to run this UAT helper. And this helper does a lot of things. What it's going to do is it's going to test the plugin, and it's going to, make sure that it conforms to Unreal Engine's coding standards. But it's also going to do other checks to make sure that your plugin has no hidden dependencies that could become an issue if you decide to distribute it outside of the project that it was created on. So as you can see here, right now I've got a bunch of things in red. So these are the easiest things to kind of find when you're doing your pack. And as you can see, an explicit category specifier was required for property, and an explicit category was required for the function. And I purposely removed that because I wanted this to kind of fire up for you guys. So let's go back to our plugin demo, bring the C++ over. So as you can see here, when I brought it in, I purposely removed it because I wanted it to throw an error like that. So now let's go ahead and just going to bring up the other project, make it a little bit easier. Let's just go ahead and put the category there. So to fix that, so again, this is for anything which is blueprint, which can be accessed through blueprints. If you don't have a blueprint on a function, or you can have it can still be a U function, but if it doesn't have blueprints specific on there, so blueprint pure, blueprint callable, right? If it doesn't have that on there, then you don't need to worry about categories. It's only when it's something that can be brought up in a blueprint does it need to actually have the category there. So we're going to call this cool base. And what you decide to call it, that's up to you. There's a couple of ways you can do it. You can put it in quotes. If you put it in quotes, you can then do this and this, and have white spaces, or you could have a category, I guess, tree by using that. If you don't put it in quotes, then it will treat it, whatever it is, as a literal, and that's what I'm just going to do here. So we do that, and then we come down here, and we do that, and we do that, and we do that. I'm going to hit save. Let's go ahead and build it again. So I'm just going to make sure we just compile it, still get a good compile. Once we get a good compile, then we'll rerun the packing process. So I'm going to dismiss that. Let's come back up to the editor, go to project settings. Actually, we don't need project settings. We need plugins. Go to cool, plugins, base plugin, hit pack, and I'm just going to remove this folder so that we can, and I'm just going to select the plugins demo. Run it again, and it should be fine. So again, depending on how big your plugin is, this could be a very quick process, or it could be a very slow process. Because it's not just, like I said, it's not just compiling; it's also running that utility on the plugin to ensure that there are no hidden dependencies within that for every single piece of code. So if you have other modules or other pieces of code within that library, it will do a full dependency check on each and every object and struct to ensure that none of those objects or structs have any hidden dependencies. And if it does, it'll flag it in the output log, and you can go ahead and find out what includes you need to put where in order to get it to be fully compatible. So keeps going. Okay, and then it's packed. So once it's packed, we can go look at the output log real quick. So let's go to the output log, and as you can see here, so if you get a build successful, everything succeeded. As you can see here, it ran through all the UAT helper stuff, and it didn't find any other issues with that base. And then so everything looks good. And if we go into the directory, we should be able to see what it has created for us. So I'm just going to pull this over. So here's our base plugin, and this is everything. So when you're looking to distribute, you want to distribute the whole folder. So if you're, if you get to here, you can always just come in and you can go ahead and compress it. Pick the compression algorithm you want to, which you want to use for distro. and then you can go ahead and distribute it. What it'll give you is this is the Win64 binaries, so I've compiled, because this is compiled for Win64 only. If you had other flavors, you'd compile it for that. So there's a lot of stuff that gets sent out, but ultimately what's going to happen is it's also going to send your source code out too. So again, this is distributing the source code in a modular fashion so that it can be picked up by Unreal Engine and used. And then here's our base plugin INI file, which is what the editor uses to kind of help bring things together. But yep. So now that we've got a base plugin, let's go ahead and do something a little bit more exotic and create a plugin that can inherit from another plugin. So, and that's kind of what we have here for our game plugin. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and move this off to the side. And let's come up here, and I'm going to go to Edit, Plugins. We're going to come back up to the Add. I'm going to say a blank plugin, and this one I'm going to call Cool Game Plugin. And again, I'm going to say Show Content Drawer. And we'll go ahead and create this plugin, and this is being created in the right solution. Make sure of that. So again, it's going to go off. So this is so plugins are great if you've got standalone components that you want to distribute in a game, but you could also technically put a lot of your game code if you're creating custom, a custom game. If you're creating game code, you can also make that as a plugin, and then in theory, the only thing that really goes into the game solution could just be, the plugins, right? And then you can build everything else off, just minimal blueprints to kind of get things going and set up. So I'm just going to say reload all. If we do that, as you can see here, we got base plugin, cool game plugin. And again, just the bare bones minimum that we need. So for this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do an actor instead. So let's go ahead and set that up. So again, since this is the first piece of code, if I come into the content drawer, here's the cool plugin, but there's no way for us to go and add a C++ because it hasn't created a C++ folder yet, unlike everything else. So in order to do that, we just need to come up here and go to Tools, and we'll say New Class. All right, so I'm actually going to pick a pawn class, but again, it's up to you on how you want to do this. And again, just like any other plugin, you've got to have it needs to have some kind of a class in the root. If you wanted to, you could put just a standalone, just a default piece of code, but it's kind of crafty. So if you've got like certain things, like you have like the main actor, the main character, or the main pawn that you want to be as that, just make sure that's in the root, and then you can have, again, off to the side all the other components that you want to add in there, if that's how you want to build out your plugin. But I'm just going to use a simple pawn here. Go to next. Again, make sure we pick the right runtime so that we can put it in there. Hit public. Make sure it's got public here, so it puts it in the public-private structure. Give it a name. Hit create class, and we'll let it do its thing. It's gone ahead and created it. It's compiling. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to have this guy, this class, what I want is for this class here in this plugin to actually reference a component in one of my other plugins. So that's why I call this one base, right? So we have the base plugin. So let's go ahead and set this up so it uses the component that is in the other plugin. So to do that, we're going to need a reference. Now this can be a little bit interesting. So first off, we're going to need an include, and what we need to now do is we need to actually point to where this thing is located within the plugin tree. So I'm going to use base and then the name of the component. So I'm just going to make this a little bit easier on myself. I'm just going to go say rename just so I can grab that. .h. So that is how you want to reference a plugin with a plugin, and you might get a red squiggly initially, and there are a couple of things that we can do to kind of remedy that. So the first thing we need to do is, because we're now using a plugin within a plugin, we now need to, in this plugin, we need to come to the base plugin. So if you've got a plugin that needs to reference other plugins, very much like if you're doing development and you in C++ and you need to reference other modules in Unreal Engine, it's the same idea. So what we've got here is we have a public dependency. These are private dependency modules, which are internal. We have a public dependency, which is actually going to be our plugin. So to do that, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to come down here and reference the plugin. So I'm just going to say rename, just so I've got it. And that's the plugin. So when you're using other plugins, you're going to need to come down to public dependency modules, and you'll need this. This is very important when it does its compiling, as well as when it does its packing process. So when it runs a compiler, because everything is now a plugin module, it needs to be able to reference and find these modules. So it's now a dependency. So we've now gone and flagged it here as a dependency. So I'm just going to do that. I'm going to hit save all. We're going to come back to here. Red squiggly is not going to go away for a little bit, but it should be resolved by now. And then I'm just going to come here and we're going to go ahead and put our new component in. See why this hasn't been resolved yet. Oh, that's because that component doesn't exist. So see if that resolves it. Cool act components. Alright, let me see why this is not finding it. Okay, so alright, so as you can see here, we've still got some red squigglies. It's still a little bit white. So one thing, just make sure that when you're doing this, make sure that you reference your plugin in the right build script. So again, cool game plugins.build. If you see that, if the red squiggly, if this has not resolved itself, it's probably just Visual Studio taking its sweet time. Typical micro slop. So but if you build it and you run the, you'll see it succeeds. So as long as it succeeds, this should be working. So again, you might need to close everything, reopen it, and magically it will fix itself. Apparently Visual Studio doesn't really handle modular coding as well as it Should be. All right, so we've got the cool base actor component here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and fit it in here. So just because we're referencing it, we need to instantiate it, and that needs to be done on gameplay. And then we're just going to add this other function here. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish this off for the demo. So let me go to begin play. Actually, no, first off, we're going to start here. So I'm just going to go grab this, and I'm just going to copy this in here. And as you can see here, I'm just going to go change this to use the name of the component that we actually want it to use. So again, this is the component that's in our base. Cool base plugin actor component. Create subdefault. And again, this is just Visual Studio just not getting it. Eventually it will get it, but in the meantime, sometimes it just takes forever to figure this out. Tick, not doing anything there. Begin play, not doing anything there. As far as the inputs, we don't have any inputs for this. The only thing I'm just going to do here for this demo is fill out this function. Again, just keeping it really simple. Going to hit save again, build. Going to ignore the red. If it compiles successfully, then we have a successful compile. All right, so that is that. So again, if you're using a plugin within a plugin, just make sure that you just reference it here as a public dependency in the base plugins, and everything should be good to go when it comes to compiling. All right, so now that we've compiled it, let's go ahead and test it, and then if it's a good test, we'll then go ahead and package it. So I'm just going to go ahead and minimize that. Let's come back to our content. I'm just going to go grab this and duplicate this. So call this, call it 3. Open this up. And I'm just going to remove that, and I'm going to remove that, compile, save, and since I just did a copy, I'm just going to go and I'm just going to do a quick little neat little trick and just say reparent blueprint. So we can hit click repair blueprint, reparents blueprint, and we can quickly change it. Since this is a pawn class, we can change it to another pawn, and it's now reparented. I probably need to close that and reopen it, and we should see the component, or maybe not. Okay, so if you switched over to the pawn and you don't see the component there, chances are it's just, Unreal Engine editor is just acting a little bit funny. My suggestion, whenever you start seeing things which are just, when working with plugins, just close everything down, recompile the C++ project, and then reopen it, and you should see it. It's just, in this version of Unreal Engine, it's just crazy. But this is using our new class, Cool Game class, right? So, and all we've done is using the same cube. Is, we just reparented it, and by reparenting it, it's just added this component to the what was already there. I removed all the functions so that we can go ahead and hook this up so that we can get this to execute, and it should work roughly the same way as the other one did, but now we have a plugin calling code in another plugin. So let's go ahead and take care of that real quick. So I'm just going to pull this up. So it's just going to be the same that we did in the other one. So And I'm just going to go grab that. Again, that function is there. So again, this component is in one plugin and it's now being used in a class in another plugin. And I'm just going to grab this again and go. So now we should have another function on here. Oh, that's right. Yep, I don't want to use that. I'm actually going to use the function on the class instead. Get cool text. So this is coming off the new pawn class that we created, and this is the actor. So we're interacting with the actor directly, and we're just going to go ahead and create this real quick. I'm going to do a print text, pull this in, hit compile, save, and this is done on tick. So I'm going to go ahead and close this real quick. Let's go into our test map. I'm just going to remove that, and we'll bring in number 3. Put that up there. I'm just going to go ahead and just possess it. Going to click on this, and as you can see, it works the same way as the other one. The only difference is this is actually using that pawn class that we created in the main game plugin, and which is then referencing the component in another plugin. All right, so now that we've got our plugins, we're testing it. So let's go ahead and try and pack the other plugin, our game plugin. So to do that, we're going to come back. We're going to go to plugins. We're going to come up to here. I'm just going to go and go into edit and just kind of set this up a little bit so it looks like all the others. And maybe just, whoops. Do that, hit OK. All right, so now we can go ahead and package this. So I'm just going to hit the package. It's going to bring this up. So this is going to go into our plugins demo. Here's our base plugin. Here's our content. And I'm just going to select that folder. Select. And we'll let the packaging process go forward. All right, so again, we have an error. So let's go ahead and bring this up. So, oops, where's our log output? There it is. So what's happened here, so this is if you're using a plugin within a plugin. So as you're kind of developing your plugins, right, you may have a hierarchy of plugins. We have an issue in which when the UAT helper executed, it couldn't find the base plugin. So as you can see here, it's a build fail and it exited out. And if we look here, right, and we go up, here it is. Could not find definition for module based plugin, right? And that is because so what seems to be happening is that when Unreal Engine does its packing process, it's looking for a plugin that it's looking for the base plugin, right, for the this plugin is using, and it can't seem to find it. It doesn't seem to look in the projects folder to see if that plugin is there. It looks in other places, but it doesn't look there, and so it suddenly says I can't find the reference. So if you get this error message, and I purposely did it this way because I know some people are going to try this, there is a way around this, and to get around this, what we need to do is we need to first compile your base plugins, right, which have and once you've got your base plugins, then what we're going to do is we're going to go and move them into an area that the UAT helper is looking to find that plugin. So to do that, I'm just going to come in here, and we're going to go ahead and, so if I go to game builds, I've got my, that's plugin builds, where is it? Test plugins. Where did I put that? All right, gotta find the actual plugin. So this is the base plugin, right? So so go to where you navigate, just navigate to where you're compiling. So we're compiling all of the, right now I'm just putting it into plugin demos. So this is the base plugin, right, that we're having that this guy is having a hard time trying to find. So while I'm here, I'm just going to go ahead and just delete it since it's failed. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy the base plugin here. And we need to put this into a place where it can be found. So to do that, what we're going to do is I'm just going to come up to my tree. I'm going to come to Epic Games and Unreal Engine. And in the engine, we have the plugins folder. So whatever engine you're currently building in, you're going to need to move your base plugins into that. And under here, if you've been bringing plugins in, you should have a folder called Marketplace. If you haven't brought any plugins in from the Marketplace into this specific version of the engine, then just go ahead and create a folder called Marketplace. Once you've created it, and as you can see here, I'm doing something very similar for all my others, you can go ahead and paste your plugin into base plugin. And once that's there, we should be able to rerun this, and it should be able to find that plugin now that it needs to reference. So I'm just going to move this off to the side, and we'll go ahead and rerun this. So I'm going to dismiss that. Okay, so once again, come to plugins, gonna go here, come into here to under your right now I've called it cool plugins. We're gonna hit package, and we're gonna select the plugins. Yeah, this is the folder where I'm putting all my plugins. So this is now sitting in the marketplace, or a version of it is in the marketplace. And so now when we compile, we would run the packing process, Unreal Engine can find the dependent plugin, and it will then suddenly say everything's good to go. So we'll let it run. Packaging for Windows. And again, depending on how large your project is, depends on how long this is running. And it's not just the compile process; it's also running that utility, and that utility is going to be running through a lot of checks. It's going to make sure it's going to go through the code, the code checks to make sure that the way that you've set things up conforms to Unreal Engine's coding standards, and then it'll also run the hidden dependency check, and as well as any external dependencies as well to make sure that they're there. And then once it feels that everything is good, there it is. And if we bring up the output, we should be able to see in our content now log out build succeed. And then one other thing you might want to do, if you have a plugin that is dependent on another plugin, we can also come into edit, and we can now come down to plugins dependencies, and we can click on this, and we can actually say which plugin we are dependent on. So if we're dependent on the cool content, or the let's see, we've got the cool function library. No, it's the base. So we have base plugin, right? So we can say that this is a dependency. So this just allows Unreal Engine. So when it goes and loads in the plugin, if it sees that the dependencies there, it will load those dependencies in for you. And then if there are plugins that are not allowed, it will also make sure that those plugins are turned off as well. So this is enabled. I think we can just leave it like that. And that should be it. All right, so I think that's going to do it for this plugin demo. I wanted to keep it simple. And kind of go over code modular, this modular architecture for you guys. So yeah, if you like what I'm doing, feel free to like and share my videos, as well as subscribe to my channel. I do have a Patreon page as well, so if you'd like to support me, you can head over there. It would be greatly appreciated. And yeah, I will catch you in the next video. Cheers, and have a great day.